There is both a brouhaha and a Donnybrook going on in Nerdland.
Oh, wait a second.
Wait a second. I heard it was more of a scuffle. A squabble? No matter how you phrase it, Hasbro and Magic the Gathering fans are straight up beefing. But what does this mean for the reserve list? Is the list itself in trouble? I think so. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to the channel, and I need to quickly compose myself from using the phrase straight up beef in the intro, because I think today's video is an important one. I want to talk about the fact that Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro has been giving us indicators for some time now that the reserve list as we know it is at least going to change, and that's going to have a much grander effect on average Magic enthusiasts like yourself, like myself, than I think we see coming. So first and foremost, the big hit news of recent times as of the recording of this video was if you were to want to see Wizards of the Coast reprint policy in regards to Magic cards, which contains all of the rules that make up the reserved list, and you go to look for the most recent iteration of that policy, you will find, well, nothing. It seems that that policy has been removed from Wizards of the Coast official website. This sparks the discussion across all corners of YouTube and Magic forums and Reddits and whatever it might be, whatever your poison of choice is. This sparks the discussion that the reserved list is dying. Hasbro is going to kill the reserve list, and as we often do on this channel in these discussions, I want to kind of take that hyperbole, put it in a box, and lock it in the corner. I don't want to think about it. I don't think there's going to be some big sweeping action that just kills and abolishes the reserve list. However, there's been several indicators, and we'll get into those in a second, that reserve list as we know it will be changing. And the fact that we go to navigate to the most recent reserve list policy and can't find that exact policy is the first big indicator. Now, the reserve list since its inception in 1996 has gone through a couple revisions, and the most recent revision included an interesting clause. And what that did basically is said, not only will Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, well, it was just Wizards of the Coast at the time, I believe, in 2010. Yeah, just Wizards of the Coast says, we will not reprint cards from the reserve list in regular Magic product. But in 2010, they also indicated that they will not reprint these cards in what's called premium product. Now, if you're a modern Magic the Gathering fan, enthusiast, hater, whatever it might be, the phrase premium product definitely sets off alarm bells, or at least the prof screaming new secret layer alert somewhere in your brain. And this policy has been exceedingly important, more so than we could have imagined, especially in the times we live in right now. It seems like there's a premium product available for us every other day, every other week, and the reserve list cards being protected against being printed in those is important. Now, the big change that happened recently that didn't violate this, but maybe is the reason for removing this clause from the website and a change to the wording of the reserve list is Magic 30th Edition. That's right, you guessed it, everyone's current favorite topic on YouTube for clicks and views. Magic 30th Edition violates what's considered to be the spirit of the reserve list. And what this means is, rather than violating the letter of the law, the spirit of the reserve list is like, hey, we created this list to protect collectors and people who are trying to build these big collections and maybe invest in our game or be interested in our game financially. We're going to protect them in the long run by saying we're never going to reprint these cards again. And reprinting those cards in Magic 30th, whether you consider them proxies or fake cards, I don't know what we're supposed to call them, but on this channel, we're going to call them fake cards. However you view them, getting those cards into the community definitely violates kind of the spirit and the idea of that list. So with that being said, those moves indicate to me that the reserve list as we know it, it's just changing, right? It's the most recent policy that outlines specifics is gone. We've seen kind of violations of this spirit and it's changing. But why and how does that affect us? Well, first and foremost, if you're not a fan of the reserve list, and I'll be honest, it's an unpopular opinion. It's weird for me as someone who's not financially big into Magic the Gathering. I definitely play Magic more than I collect it, but I am for the reserve list. I like the idea that there's these protected collector pieces, and I'll get into this in a later video later this week, so if you hang out, make sure you're around for that one. I think a game requires a lot of people engaging with it in many different ways to be as successful as Magic is. You need your players, but you also need your collectors and investors, and most people fall on this spectrum somewhere in between the two. Very few people are full collector and very few people are full player, right? Someone falls somewhere in between more often than not. But this reprint, this Magic 30th, really doesn't sanctify the whole we want accessibility that comes from the player standpoint, right? If you're a player, you don't like the reserve list, you want accessibility, you say, I want to be able to play with these cards. And this doesn't really give us the ability to do that. First and foremost, packs are $250, so it's not exactly accessible for players. You know, we can't really use this as a way to jumpstart and get into other formats, and even if we could, even if packs were accessible and affordable, the cards really aren't real, so it doesn't really unlock vintage Magic or Legacy or anything like that, because we can't actually use the game pieces in those formats, or at least Wizards sanctioned formats. And finally, they're going for kind of the same price as the cheapest version of those cards were online anyway. So if we wanted to kind of spend that money on this new product, we could have just spent the money on the existing cards. Now, as the product kind of matures and shakes out, maybe this price will come down and that will become irrelevant, but either way, they're not actually cards. So it makes it very clear that the change, these indicators are flying around, this change is because of one thing and one thing only, and you guessed it, it seems to be because of money. And this is the last indicator that I believe shows us the reserve list is in trouble. I was talking to a friendly bozo from a podcast that I do every Friday over on Kitchen Table TCG. I'm part of the May the Zuby With You podcast. And George, owner of Compete Sport, made an interesting point. He is feverishly on the podcast anti-reserve list, and I am very much for the reserve list. And he said, if you're for the reserve list and the reserve list is something you're interested in seeing sticking around, one of the biggest indicators you should watch is Hasbro stock price. Because Hasbro knows by abolishing this reserve list, they now have access to a vault of some of Magic's most coveted game pieces that they can sell in the most premiumiest premium product known to man, and it 100% will sell out. So if Hasbro ever needs a big influx of cash, we could find that the reserve list, or at least the clause preventing the printing of reserve list cards in premium product with different packs or whatever it is, we could find that to be in danger. And this makes a ton of sense to me, and this means that the reserve list sticking around or being abolished has a bigger effect on players like you and me, because it won't necessarily unlock access to those game pieces. We won't be able to get them, you know, for all of our commander decks. Dual lands aren't going to come down and be $20 because they're going to be printed in some set all of a sudden. It means these game pieces are still going to be highly collectible, highly premium. It could, and I believe would, in fact, damage the current value of those game pieces, of those items, hurting end of that spectrum where the collectors and hardcore investors live, and it doesn't give us players more access. So all in all, this is a scary time for the reserve list. I don't think it's abolished. I don't think it's going anywhere, but I do think it's changing. And if you were to ask me, that change is not for the better. It's really not going to affect us players like we think. Now, granted, if they unlock the reserve list and then they print duels in the next standard set and they're in the rare slot and you get, that changes the math a little bit and definitely hurts one end of the spectrum far more than it does the other. However, I can't see them doing that. I can't see them just abolishing the reserve list, unlocking everything. I believe that we're going to see some change here. If we do see a printing, it's going to be in some ultra premium product, which again, hurts our collectors, hurts our investors, doesn't necessarily help our players. And maybe my hot take, my tinfoil hat before I let you guys go, is we see something like a reserve list suspension. We say, okay, for Magic 30th, the big culmination of our celebration for everybody is that we are going to suspend the reserve list for a weekend. We're going to do a weekend of crazy printing and selling this product, and then it's back. It's back on. And that's such a cold take, but can you imagine the fires that would just flow from Mount Doom from that moment? Anyway, I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. I know my take on the reserve list is not that of most players. I know most players want to see the reserve list abolished. They want to see access to these game pieces, and they want to play all these other formats that they otherwise might not have the chance to. So let me know in the comment section below your take. And according to my last couple of videos, I think 60 some odd % of you guys who are watching these videos are not subscribed. So click that sub button. It helps the channel out so much. Follow me on social medias. Links can be found in this video description. Click the like button, and most importantly, share this video with a friend that you think is interested, maybe has a different view than you, or maybe wants to leave a mean comment to me in the comment section. I've been getting a little of those recently. So guys, thank you so much for hanging out. Until next time, you guys know me. My name is Josh, and we're gonna see how this reserve list thing plays out. I'm excited to find out. We'll see you around.